Alright, welcome to a new video. After quite some break on this subject, I decided to do a book review, book recommendation again, because, well, it doesn't make much sense to me to talk about books that I don't like, so I recommend the book to you. But it's, I guess, only made mostly interesting for players who play 1e4, as I already played here on the board. Most of my opening related stuff in the channel has been about non-e4 openings, or if I spoke about 1e4, then it was from Black's point of view in my e4 e5 repertoire series. So I only talked about this from the black side. So this book here is about 1e4, and it's called Beating Unusual Chess Defenses 1e4. It's by an international master, Andrew Greed, and this author has written a couple of books before. It's not his first book, and I really like those books. So I became interested in this subject also. I mean, I don't even play 1e4, but there are some transpositions after 1d4 also, because, well, I play d4, and if someone goes d6 or g6, then I like to play e4, and it sort of transposes. So this book was interesting also for me. But I also, as I mentioned, liked the other books that he wrote before. He wrote a very nice one about the Queen's Indian defense for black, and also about what was this? The Accelerated Dragon. Yeah, both fine books. So, what is this book about? I think it addresses a pretty important issue for 1e4 players, and that this is, if you look what are the most popular moves here, you'll see that if you add it all up, I guess 80% of the time you get something out of those four moves. It's e5, e6, c5, or c6. Yeah, so both e and c pawn moves, those four, are the most popular defenses, and I guess this applies to all levels of chess. You very often see in the lower ranks, like 1500 players or something, they play e5 very often, because it's the first move that they learn. Or the French is very popular on club level, but also on the international circuit. So those four moves are basically the main moves, and against these you very often have a wide choice of what you can play, and usually you also cannot expect to get some huge advantage in the opening, because, well, those moves are main lines for a reason, because they're pretty reliable for black. But you have quite a huge choice as white against all those defenses. Let's say, just for instance, if you look at the French, you can easily play this, or knight c3, or e5, or whatever. You have a couple of choices. Or after e5, it's even more. Even in this position, you have bishop c4, or bishop. Oops, this was a bit too quick here. Or you have the Ruy Lopez, bishop e5. So white has a really huge choice, and also quite a choice of styles and how you can handle those different openings. And what Greed did here in this book, he compiled a repertoire for white against everything but those four moves. So in this book here, which has 300 pages total, you get recommendation against all black's moves besides e5, e6, c6, and c5. So this comprises quite a huge range of moves, but it's very useful to have one guide where you get sound and solid advice against all those moves, because I mean they do get played. It's not like you never get the Alekhine or Alekhine, I cannot pronounce it, I'm sorry, defense, or you get the Scandinavian or center counter at one point. And he's got recommendation against all of these. So he basically says, okay, you need to have something ready for the big form, e5, e6, and so on, but it's very much a matter of taste. But I'll show you one way against those somewhat rarer moves where you can really fight for an advantage, because these moves are, well, not so 100% on the same kind of level of soundness that those other four moves are. So I think you have much more, how to phrase it, have much more reason to hope for something if the opponent plays like d6 or g6. I mean, you have more possibilities to press for an advantage compared to those main lines in a way. So what is in this book? Let's just go quickly through this. It's the center counter or Scandinavian defense, the Alekhine or Alekhine defense. It's about all kinds of stuff with d6, followed up by a quick e5 or g6. So the modern defense, or also the usual Pirc defense, also those kind of lines. This is all in this book. Also, it has those moves like b6, or even those this move a6, which once was played by Tony Martz to beat Karpov, which is always given as some kind of sensational result. Of course, it was a sensational result, but Martz winning with a6, but no one really looks at the game, and Karpov was completely winning and somehow blundered this position. Okay. So it's all kinds of moves. Or knight c6, I forgot, it's also in this book. So it has quite a huge range of single moves here from Black's point of view that it handles. I give you a quick overview what he recommends, so that you get an idea what kinds of lines he's giving. Let's start with the Scandinavian defense. Of course, he takes, and let's look at queen d5 first. Here he's got quite an interesting recommendation. Of course, you would instantly play this move, because, well, everybody plays it almost, winning a tempo and continuing from here. Queen a5 or queen d6 are the moves here. But he's giving some different idea, and I really like the idea. He's recommending here knight f3, which is a somewhat rarer move, but it has a very ambitious idea. In fact, if you look at the position with knight c3, quite often, if you put some kind of normal position on the board, quite often this knight on c3 is not particularly well placed. It's in this case even in a pin here, so it cannot move. But very often you really want a pawn on c3 to support the point d4, or even want to advance c4 at some point. It's also an idea. So this knight on c3 is often not really a good piece. This also shows why white very often plays something along these lines here to get rid of the knight on c3. So what white tries to do with knight f3 is, in fact, he wants to win a tempo on the queen, but he wants to do so using the move c4 later. He wants to set up c4, d4, sort of building up an ideal center, and he just delays the tempo gain here with this move knight f3. The drawback of this move, the issue is, black can play very actively here, bishop g4, bishop e2, knight c6, d4, and long castles. And if black doesn't go for long castling setups, white can, I think, count on an advantage, because he has this tempo with c4 later and just has an advantage in the center. It's not completely easy, but white should be better. if black doesn't play so ambitiously. And here I think his main recommendation is bishop e3, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, bishop e3. And this leads to quite interesting complications. Something along these lines here. And you see, it's I don't want to to give everything I'm sorry, to give everything what's in the book in this video. It's just want to show it. It's quite a sharp line, but it's a kind of line, if you know your stuff here and looked at this in the book, you have quite a good chance to get a real advantage in the opening, because black very often doesn't know the details of these kind of sharp lines. And if black doesn't go for this long castling, as I mentioned, it's very convenient for white. This kind of setup also would happen if black plays this kind of stuff. Then you can just continue knight f3, and if you go here, white will occupy the center again. He also gives some detailed analysis of this. I think this knight f3 idea in this kind of at this point here is very worthwhile considering, because it's less explored and black players don't know it so well, and you have real chances of surprising your opponent while still being I mean it's a good line. It doesn't have a serious drawback. Also, it has been played by a couple of top players. Let's say Movsesian, Sergei Movsesian, who's a 2700 grandmaster. It has been played by Grishuk, by Karyakin. So it's not an obscure line that no decent player would touch. So quite interesting, this recommendation against the Scandinavian. The second chapter here deals with the modern and the Pirc defense. So we're talking about the Pirc, whatever here, or the modern this way, or via this move order. Yeah, of course, those two openings are somewhat related and can easily transpose. He has a very straightforward approach, as he basically always wants to go for an f4 setup, which I really like. I think this is a very, very classical kind of way to well, classical is maybe not the correct way to put it, but a very straightforward way to play. It occupies the center and develops your pieces to somewhat logical squares, like knight to f3 later, bishop here, maybe queen to d2 or e2, and then according to circumstances castle long or castle short. Quite a lot of arrows here. I think I should get rid of these, a bit too much. So it's very very much focused on central control by pawns, which in my book always makes sense. So he goes f4 here, and he also goes f4 in this kind of position, and also and there's also this move order that black might choose with c6, where he also goes for f4 with this as a possible continuation. So it's quite consistent here, this f4 approach. Black in this d6 lines also might go for this setup here, also answered by f4, and I think this is well known for a couple of years that black can't really equalize here. It's I mean, it would be quite strange if black can just ignore the center here. So this is just I think the best line against c6. He comes up with a surprising, at least for me, recommendation against e5, this sort of neo Philidor. Most people here are trying to fight for an advantage with knight f3, or maybe some try knight e2, but usually it's one of those knight moves. And d takes e5 is usually not regarded as being too dangerous, but he makes a quite interesting case for this exchange, with this being 1 point. This g3 move, it's quite interesting. It prepares this bishop exchange with bishop to h3 at some point, but also prepares f4, which can be a good idea to attack the center here. White might castle long at a later stage, but not right away. It's an interesting idea, and maybe quite poisonous to try this. One reason also is why sometimes the study of those somewhat dull-looking exchange lines can be interesting is from Black's point of view. He's got quite some other lines to worry about and not so much the exchange. So very often players don't really look at this in so much detail. And if you have an idea which is interesting, that it's maybe worth a try. It's quite similar to my own experience with lines like the Slav exchange for white, which is really it really has a dull reputation of being sort of unambitious and if you look at my score, you'll see that I win almost all games. So it's just like Black is not really looking at those lines. Because there are other things to worry about, and if you have some ideas in there, it's maybe interesting to try this recommendation. But if you don't like it, you might as well choose some other stuff which you can look up in another book or in the database, like knight f3, knight d7 and bishop c4, the main line, or even Shirov's crazy g4 here, which is still not refuted, amazingly. Interesting stuff there as well. I think that's it basically for those d6, g6 kind of lines. Next up is the Alekhine defense, where he chooses the following: of course e5, d4, d6. And now white has mostly two choices here, going c4 or knight f3, and he opts for the arguably the main line with knight f3, the most solid and maybe most promising way. It's a bit hard for me to evaluate this because I'm not a huge expert here. He doesn't go for c4, which is the main alternative. I think the 4 pawns is still valid, but not the kind of line where white really fights for an advantage. It's very double-edged, and I think against the exchange here, e takes d6 is pretty solid for black. It's not it's not the most exciting line for both sides, really. It looks a bit like a Petrov with the open e-file, where very often you get pieces exchanged later. So he goes for knight f3 here, and he looks at all black's continuations here: g6, bishop g4, c6, and so on. D takes e5 is the main line nowadays, followed by by g6 or c6, which is maybe the most common line nowadays, also played by Carlsen at some occasions. And white cannot really hope for a huge advantage against this opening, but it's often the kind of slight advantage with some better control of the center, slightly better development, those kind of small advantages that you need to nurse in a long-term, with long-term plans and some maneuvering. You cannot overrun black here. I don't think I need to really go into detail here. I think the general consensus about this opening, the Alekhine, is that if white knows his stuff, he will get a little bit of something. It's not a huge advantage, but it's something. And this book just compiles the known information there, how to get to this slight advantage. I think it's nothing spectacular in there, but it's a good compilation of the stuff you need to know to have something here. I think these are the main points here in the book. The other lines are really quite obscure, but you get them once in a while. On knight c6, he plays knight f3, which is important in a way. So if you get e5 here, you better know what you do. So if you play, I don't know, the Vienna or something against e4, e5, then well, you need to have an idea here. But okay, if you play the Vienna, you might go here. Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of material on this line, which I really didn't know before at all. He plays bishop e3, just normal developing stuff, and usually ends in a slight advantage for white, which is very believable. You still have some central advantage. Yeah, he also gives a bit of something on b6. Here he gives this line, which is quite interesting, with knight g2. I didn't know that really, but it makes yeah, it looks quite interesting to study. The idea being on c5 he sacrificed the pawn here, which is a well-known idea from d4 openings. You don't see it so often in e4. Yeah, well, don't want to look at it in detail here, but it looks like quite interesting compensation. And on a move like bishop b4, this is quite pointless, as it just nets white the bishop pair. e4 is very nicely protected. So I think it's a pretty good book. It does a good job of providing you with just the right amount of information you need to know to battle all those slightly less common lines, but they're still not unimportant. I think it's good to have something ready, especially against those d6 and g6 lines. I'm not quite sure about the statistics here, but I think those are played more often on a club level than you might think, compared to those yeah, big four openings, c6, c5, e5, and e6. And it's good to have some idea ready on those. And some of his ideas there are quite poisonous, I would say. So yeah, I made this book review also for the 1E Pro players here, because I sort of neglected this before in the channel. So yeah, who should get this book? It's always difficult to say what kind of let's say rating range is suited for a book. I think from 1800, 1900 upwards, this book is very much okay to use. It doesn't really have the depth of those kind of mammoth Grandmaster Repertoire series books, which are certainly fantastic efforts, but very hard to use for the average player, because they're simply too detailed. It's just difficult in those really big and thorough books to find the essential points, and I think it's quite a good effort here to show those essential lines, so that you can play this here with confidence. Yeah, I'll post the link in the description, maybe slightly later, so that you can have a detailed look at the book. Maybe I'm not quite sure. There's even an extract at the publishing site, so that you can have a concrete look at some of the stuff. Yeah, thanks for watching the video. I also like to hear your thoughts about book reviews, what kind of books you would like to see reviewed in the future maybe. Yeah, thanks for watching, and talk to you soon with a new video.